Welcome to the Muscle Expert Podcast with Ben Pakulski, one of the world's top professional bodybuilders, an expert on human performance and mindset mastery. Ben dives deep to deliver the strategies of the top experts to upgrade your body, mind, muscle, strength, performance, biochemistry, and how to become the upgraded modern man. Join us on benpakulski.com to learn the cutting-edge techniques to take control of your body, your brain, and create your greatest life.
Hey, welcome to the Muscle Expert Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Pakulski, and today we're going to dive into autoimmunity and gut health. So anyone who's trying to live a great life, gut is step one. Gut is your first barrier to all these things that are going into your mouth, whether it be water or food, and how your gut interprets this information is going to determine your health, your happiness, and a lot of things. A lot of scientists are calling the gut the second brain. Some people are even saying it's even more important than your brain because it's actually the place that's producing all your serotonin, a lot of your dopamine, a lot of your melatonin, a lot of these things that are influencing your mood, your stress, and your life. So today we're going to interview Dr. Tom O'Brien. He's written the book called The Autoimmune Fix. We talk about a lot of really interesting topics about autoimmunity, about how to fix your gut, a lot of the things in your environment that are literally destroying your body, and also, as Dr. Tom will point out, destroying the human race. He's got some really, really interesting, scientifically backed statements throughout this podcast. You're going to absolutely love it. The list of takeaways is astronomical. So if you're someone who's really interested in living your greatest life, I suggest you get a paper and pen if you can, or this is going to be the type of thing you're going to want to listen to at least once, probably twice. And this is the type of thing that I'm going to send to my mom and my entire family right away and anyone I care about, because removing the stimulus is step one. Whether you're trying to lose fat, whether you're trying to improve your body's ability to detox environmental toxins or estrogen, anything like that. Step one is removing the toxin, and Dr. Tom talks a lot about what those toxins are and how exactly they're destroying our body and ultimately preventing us from living an amazing life in a body that we love, because you can't lose fat in a toxic body. So enjoy this episode with Dr. Tom O'Brien. Dr. Tom, where are you located?
I am in Encinidas, California.
Oh man, it's like the epicenter of everything good to do with health.
Well, it's really a blessing to be here. It really is. I spent 30 years in Chicago, and every day I literally wake up and say, thank you, every day.
Yeah. Yes. So literally, I plan to come to Encinitas probably every 2 to 3 months because one, it's probably my favorite place in the United States. And two, like literally everyone that I want to talk to, or I have so many friends in San Diego and Encinitas, everyone I want to talk to for podcasting and such is right in that area.
Oh, marvelous.
Yeah, it's like a hub.
It is. Yeah. There's a reason for that. There was a guy that came from India in 1922 named Paramahansa Yogananda. Mm-hmm. And this guy came to teach yoga. And he was the real deal. He didn't have sex with the women and drive Rolls Royces or had charged lots of money. He was the real deal.
Right.
And he's got millions of followers. They founded the Self-Realization Fellowship, and he wrote a book about his life called Autobiography of a Yogi.
I've just bought it.
Oh, there you go, man. There's the calling. Well, their headquarters are in Palisades, outside of Los Angeles, but their retreat center is here in Encinitas. Okay. So right here in this little seaside community, there are thousands of people that follow the message of Paramahansa Yogananda. And his message is, here's a way to meditate so you can get closer to God, however you call God. Buddha, Yahweh, Jesus, it doesn't matter. However you call God, here's a way of meditating to get closer to God. Now, go out in the world and do good. That's the entire message. There's no philosophy or dogma.
Yeah.
And so people here, you walk down the street and they go, hi. You say hi. And then you just keep walking, past each other. But there is an openness, a receptivity that, there's undesirable people everywhere, but there's just a high concentration of good people here. So the energy here in Encinitas is really quite spectacular.
You know what? I've for the last maybe 18 months, I've been diving into the yoga lifestyle, the yoga mentality, and it just seems to be the most commonsensical, right? You're just like, just be nice to people, treat other people well, and love everyone. You're like, okay, that seems like the kind of glue that binds all humanity, right? Rather than like, hey, you must follow this religion or you're going to go somewhere bad that you're really unhappy with.
You
Just
bet. Well, that's something that we're all missing nowadays, is that kind of just platform guidance. And I would just tweak what you said a little bit, and that is be kind to everyone, not nice.
yeah,
Nice is, I don't want to make waves. I'm going to be a nice person.
right,
Kind is being authentic with what's in your heart and soul and speaking your truth
yeah,
with compassion, speaking your truth with compassion. And
So
that's being
you get
kind.
this as an educator. Like as an educator, I always believe you have two opportunities, right? You have an opportunity to teach the world how to do something by telling them, hey, think about it this way. Let me show you a different way to do this. Let me show you how to do this the right way. Or you have the opportunity to go, you're an idiot. You're doing this incorrectly.
Yeah.
And as an educator, you always have that choice. And you obviously choose to teach people like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to do this the right way. And there's so many people out there who take the opposite approach. And that's, to me, what a lot of these religions do is like, kind of taking the negative angle where they're saying, you do it this way or you're going to go to hell.
I've got to give a call out to my wife, who has so much courage. Many of us in life, when we were kids, we had some trauma of one type or another. And many of us have done some type of therapy as an adults to get our heads on a little straighter, something like that. And you get to a point where you realize that these young children, that they don't have the defenses against the assault of a parent's anger. And parents tend to not turn their anger on in degrees, but rather it's on off. It's a switch.
Yeah.
And so when they're angry, they're full force, the adult energy coming at this little being that doesn't have the skill set to deflect some of that, and it's traumatizing. And I kudos to my wife that we were sitting in a restaurant, and some guy, was yelling at his 5 or 6 year old because she wasn't sitting up straight at the table. She's kind of slouching, and it was like full force and saying not so nice things. And my wife looked at me, and I just, kind of gave the, what are you going to do? And then she just got up and walked over there and said, excuse me. The guy looked, he said, a child doesn't have the defenses to take on an adult's anger like that. That just a simple, straight communication can go right into a child. They hear you. You don't have to blast them. And then she turned around and walked back. And the guy just looked at her, and the assumed wife was kind of smiling under her breath, and you could see the eyes of gratitude. And then I just watched this guy because he started to get a little fire in his eyes. And then he saw that she walked over and sat down, and I'm looking at him. And, it's like, you want fire, man? Bring it. and he just quieted down right away. But, we allow this type of assault to occur to children all the time. And I just came from breakfast and at a local restaurant, and these 2 little kids were there, and a beautiful little brother, sister, and I could see immediately they both have autoimmune diseases going on. I can see some of the telltale signs, and you just think about the assault that comes into our bodies today, chemically, emotionally, spiritually, structurally, dietarily. All of the assault is the reason why autoimmune diseases are on such a rise now. They're exponentially rising, all of them. And we're here to talk about how the immune system gets assaulted by our environment. And the environment is both outside of our bodies and inside our bodies. The inside environment is called endotoxemia. Good Scrabble word, means inside your body, it's toxic.
Yep.
So I'm just kind of rolling it over into our topic today, but the emotional trauma is just as important to address as biochemical trauma in the fueling of diseases.
That's so interesting because that's part of the conversation that I'm trying to lead. So the fitness industry, and many other industries, but the fitness industry is the one that I talk to and one that I, hold close to my heart. It's people who are typically living a massively stressed lifestyle, right? And we're just adding stress on top of stress, and they go to the gym and it's more stress. And oftentimes they don't even want to go to begin with. So the thought of going creates a stress in their mind, and they go and they don't want to be there. They don't like the way they're doing it. It's just layering of stress and
Oh
like
my
you're saying,
gosh,
these
yes.
assaults on the body, right? And this is part of the conversation I'm trying to lead, Dr. Tom, is I want people to realize that the only way you can truthfully, the framing of my podcast is living your greatest life in your greatest body. And the only way you can live a life in a body that you love and actually love your body is if you start to change your perception of reality, the way you look at the gym, the way you look at your body, the way you look at your life, and all of these assaults, to use your term, start to melt away. So tell me how these things are starting to influence, on a physiological level. My demographic is very intelligent, and on a physiological level, what's actually happening inside the body, starting with the endotoxemia, the things that are happening, psychologically. What is the result, or what is the cause of autoimmunity? How's that actually happening?
Aha. There is a trilogy in the development of autoimmune diseases. First, there's a genetic vulnerability. You really can't do anything about that. That's the deck of cards you were dealt in life. But that doesn't mean you're going to get the disease. It means you're vulnerable to the disease. Mrs. Patient, if you pull at a chain, the chain always breaks at the weakest link. It's at one end, the middle, the other end. It's your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidneys. Wherever your genetic weak link is, if you pull at the chain too hard, that's where it's going to break. So that's your genetics. So the goal is don't pull on the chain so hard.
Yeah.
So that's the therapeutic protocol, is to what is it that's pulling on the chain of life for me. So the first component of the development of autoimmune diseases is your genetics. The second component is an environmental trigger, and that's what's pulling on the chain. And really, it's the accumulation of environmental triggers that you hit a threshold, pulling on the chain, pulling on the chain, pulling on the chain, until that chain starts to break. So it's not just, for example, there is no evidence, absolutely no evidence, that the aluminum in a vaccine causes autism. There is not one shred of evidence, because the aluminum is such a minor amount that it's impossible for it to. However, I just came back from the 11th International Congress on Autoimmunity in Lisbon, and the presentations there were very, very clear. The half-life of aluminum at the site of injection in your body is 7 to 11 years, depending on the individual. 7 years of that stuff in your body. And people don't get one vaccination. People get, now the new recommendations are over 20 for every child. So you take that amount of aluminum and multiply it by 20. Now you've got a toxic dose, right? But the way the chemical industry and the pharmaceutical industry has gotten away with negating the correlation between the adjuvant, and in this case it's aluminum, and used to be mercury in the compound thimerosal, and there's not so much of that. There's still some, but there's been such a stink about mercury toxicity in vaccines, they moved over to aluminum. And the way they get away with allowing it to be licensed is that there's no evidence that the amount of aluminum in a vaccination is going to harm you. That's true. But no one at the government level that evaluates safety has looked at the half-life of these things in your body and the accumulation of this stuff. Just go to just go to Google and type in aluminum and Alzheimer's. Here come the studies. Hundreds of studies now on this. So what does that mean? Well, it's not just the aluminum in vaccines. It's aluminum foil. You take aluminum foil and you bake with it. You bake with it at 185 degrees centigrade, that's 365 Fahrenheit. You bake with it for an hour and a half, and when you see the studies and you see what happens to that aluminum foil, it drops your jaw. That you just magnify it so you can see more clearly, and you can see the aluminum foil is all cracked and busted up. It's not a smooth sheet. And when you magnify it further, you see these are all little pieces. and the pieces of aluminum foil get in your food. You bake a chicken with aluminum foil or a turkey in the oven, you got aluminum in the food. There's no question. The studies are really clear on this stuff.
Wow.
Or you store your food in the refrigerator wrapped in aluminum foil. You get aluminum in your food. And it's the accumulation, not only of aluminum, but the pesticides, the insecticides, the phthalates, the PCBs, the DDT, the heavy metals. It's the accumulation of all of these toxic and chemicals in our environment that we're exposed to that has created what's called the threshold effect. And when you cross the line and you now start, your immune system says, whoa, I've got to fight this stuff. This stuff is not good for me at all. And you start making antibodies to fight these environmental toxins, you now are pulling on your chain. And as you continue to pull on the chain, the link eventually breaks, and here comes the manifestation in wherever your genetics are of an autoimmune mechanism. So It's Alzheimer's, or Parkinson's, or autism, or attention deficit, or recurrent miscarriages, or knee pain, or psoriasis, or MS, or lupus, or psoriasis. It doesn't matter. Wherever the weak link is determined by your genetics and your antecedents, that's where it's going to manifest when you pull on that chain hard enough. And we think that we've got time to spare. So I'm going to go into this right now. We don't have time to spare. I'm going to tell you 2 studies. The first study from the Environmental Working Group came out about 2 years ago, and they've looked between 1970 and 2011. In 41 years, there has been an average 58% reduction in populations of all vertebrate species on the planet. Everything with a spine, insects, birds, fish, mammals, everything with a spine, 58% reduction. They're gone in 41 years. For the aviaries, it was 35%. For the mammals living near fresh water, it's 78%. 78% of the beavers are gone. The porcupines are gone. The bobcats are gone. They're gone. In 41 years, gone. Not to return. Gone. Why? Well, they're drinking the water. If you were drinking the water coming out of the stream near your house or coming out of the river near where you live, you'd get cancer quicker. You'd be unable to reproduce, just like the animals. And then you'd disappear. The second study is a meta-analysis, means they look at a whole lot of studies on the same subject. And this was 186 studies on sperm count in healthy men between 1974 and 2011, so 37 years, same basic time period. What did they find? Healthy men, 59% reduction of sperm count across the board, 59%. Scientists worry about extinction of a species at 72%. We've lost 59% of our sperm count in 37 years. What do you think is going to happen in the next 20 years? Mm-hmm. And this is all coming from the amount of environmental toxins we're being exposed to. These environmental toxins are called endocrine disruptors. They disrupt your hormones. They bind onto your estrogen and testosterone receptor sites and cause havoc in your body. And it's wiping out the species. Infertility and increased cancer, increased diseases, killing people off at earlier ages. Scientists are now writing for the first time. Papers started coming out a couple of years ago. Just go to PubMed, stands for Public Medical Information, pubmed.gov. It's National Library of Medicine, and type in 6th extinction. The 6th extinction is being predicted now. It's humans within the next 50 years. If we keep this up, if we keep our heads buried in the sand, if we keep going to the coffee shop and getting our coffee and tea to go with those plastic lids on them, if we keep using saran wrap, if we keep drinking water out of plastic bottles, if we keep using aluminum foil, if we keep living in houses full of PCBs from the carpeting and the Scotchgard on the furniture and the flame retardant chemicals in your sleeping apparatus. How many people do you know that have been saved from death because they were in a fire and they were sleeping under flame-resistant clothing or flame-resistant sheets and blankets? Yeah, I don't, but these things outgas. You're breathing them all the time. And it's the accumulative threshold of this. There's no study, not one study, that shows the flame retardant chemicals in your down comforter are harmful for you. There's not one study. But there are many studies that acknowledge this stuff outgasses and you breathe it in. There are many studies on that. It's just what accumulates in your body. What's the half-life of this stuff? How efficient is your detoxification system? This is really, wake up, people. Wake up.
That's where the genetic component comes in as well, right? Is if some people have an inefficient detox pathway, then all of a sudden they become predisposed to holding on to these things.
That's exactly right. They're the yellow canaries in the coal mine. So the formaldehyde that's leaching out of your kitchen cabinets is much worse for them. If your furniture is not solid wood, it's pressboard or pressed wood of one type or another, or it's got a veneer coating on it. That stuff is loaded with toxic chemicals that outgas for years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what was the third aspect of the trilogy? You said genetics, environmental triggers.
Right. The first one is your genetics. The second one is the environmental triggers. And the third one is intestinal permeability, the leaky gut. And so dialing down, and that's really my area of expertise. I am on the faculty of the Institute for Functional Medicine, and my area of expertise and what I teach on is intestinal permeability. And when I started doing this 9 years ago for IFM, a lot of doctors in the room, the traditional doctors that were wanting to learn something else, so kudos to them. A lot of doctors in the room would cross their arms when I'd start talking, and by the end of the talk, they would be on the edge of their chairs wanting to hear more, but there was this defensiveness. But nowadays, everyone's heard about intestinal permeability, so it's really dialing down, how does this happen? What are the triggers that set this off? And how do I reverse this? And so papers have come out in the medical literature that say you can arrest, and that's the language they use, you can arrest the development of autoimmune disease by healing the gut. So,
and this is really what I want to get into today, Dr. O'Brien. This is a massive area of concern for me and all of my listeners because it's reality. And I don't have numbers, but I'm sure you do, on the number of people that probably exist with a large degree of intestinal permeability kind of perpetually, just ongoing.
Oh,
and,
yes.
I'm so interested in this topic because, I've lived that reality for a long time. I was a previous professional bodybuilder. The constant consumption, this constant quest to accumulate muscle had me on the daily, overeating schedule. And oftentimes it's just eating whatever calories you can get your hands on because you're trying to gain weight. And then that just led to massive GI distress, which is prevalent in pretty much everybody in the fitness industry. So I want to really dive into this topic with you today. I'm going to let you just kind of keep going like you have, because I know you've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Just leading us down the understanding of what are the main triggers, and then I'd love to get into what we can start to do to mitigate it.
You bet. Well, thanks so much. The concept of the accumulative amount of toxins, and I use the example of vaccines and multiple vaccines and the aluminum that's in our arms and that slowly leaches into your system over 7 years, 9 years, 11 years. But the accumulative amount of toxins that we're exposed to, I hopefully just dropped a bunch of people's jaw with what I just said on that, that we're all exposed to this stuff. And this is the catalyst that sets off the autoimmune mechanism, that from there, I want to take us into the accumulative damage to the microbiome. So the first thing to recognize is the microbiome is the environment from the mouth to the other end, and everything that's in there. There's also a microbiome to your muscles. There's a microbiome to your breasts, a microbiome to your testes, many different microbiomes. Guys, when you sweat a lot, and if you sweat a lot and your shirts don't smell, but your underwear smells, you got a lot of toxic microbiome in your testes. That's a new concept for most people, that the microbiome is not just in your gut, it's throughout your body. The studies are really clear that a woman with breast cancer, the microbiome in the cancerous breast is much different than the microbiome in the other breast. And so I want to take us first to this whole concept of the microbiome. And many of us have heard there's 10 times more cells of bacteria in our gut than all the human cells in the body put together. all of the muscle cells, bone cells, brain cells, organ cells, skin cells, add them all up, and you've got 10 times more cells of the microbiome, the bacteria in your gut. And that microbiome generates 100 to 150 times more genes and gene activity than the human genome. We know that there is 23 to 25,000 genes in the human genome. Well, there is 100 to 150 times more genes in the bacteria in your gut. And genes turn on the production of proteins. Proteins are the messengers going throughout the body giving instruction on what to do. Make this heart muscle contract, produce this amount of neurotransmitters in your brain, rebuild this amount of muscle tissue. That it's the genes that determine function and activity. So we've got 10 times more genes, 10 times more bacteria with 100 to 150 times more genes in the bacteria in us than the human genome. Some of you have heard that humans have about the same amount of genes as an earthworm. That's true. That's true. But it's the microbiome. It's the 10 times more cells and 150 times more genes of the microbiome that make us the dominant species on the planet. So we have to live in harmony with the microbiome inside of us.
Now, that's interesting. So would other species not have the same diversity of microbiome that we do?
That's correct. They do not. They do not.
Is that what allows us to have such a diverse diet and be omnivores, or
that's correct? And that's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why we have such a diversity of bacteria, is because our ancestors roaming the planet didn't have constant source of food, and there were many different foods. They're seasonal, and the microbiota you need to digest the berries that harvest in the late spring, early summer are very different than the microbiome needed in January and February to digest tubers.
Yeah.
You know, that our ability to adapt is because of our microbiome. So we often have the discussion after a full day of lecturing. You know, we sit down, have a glass of wine at the end of the day, and it's usually after the second glass of wine that we start talking about, are we humans with a lot of bacteria, or are we bacteria having a human experience?
Exactly.
And, you know, it's kind of a cute thing to say, and, you know, we all laugh about it, but then we dial down and say, well, who's controlling the function of the brain?
Do you know Dr. Ted Achikoso? I interviewed Dr. Ted Achikoso, who's on the board of the World Microbiome Association, and he makes the same joke. He said, you know, we're literally just carrying vessels for bacteria, right? We're designed for the distribution around the planet of these bacteria. That's his kind of evolutionary thought process.
That's exactly right. And it's not a joke, everyone. Yeah. It's not a joke. It's the truth. Just look at the numbers. If you look at the science, well, I don't believe that. I don't care if you believe it. Just look at the science. I mean, it's mind expanding to think about that. But the takeaway is, I mean, this is not some esoteric theoretical dogma that we're talking about. The takeaway is, I need to make friends with my microbiome. Mm-hmm. And the more you make friends with the microbiome, the more happy your body is, the more of a parasympathetic dominant state you're in. And as everyone knows, you don't build new muscle unless you're in a parasympathetic dominant state. So
they don't know that, but we're teaching them that, Dr. Tom.
Well, yeah. So in fitness, you know, for fitness and building muscle and you know, being Adonis and a babe, and you know, if that's our goals, which is great, you know, and do that's great. But you don't do that unless you're in a parasympathetic dominant state. When do you get in a parasympathetic dominant state? When you're sleeping. Mm-hmm. We're always in a parasympathetic dominant state. Well, what about other times? Only when you're calm. You know, when you're fighting saber-toothed tigers, when you're in a fight, flight, or fright mode of operation, that's called a sympathetic state, sympathetic dominant nervous system. And in that state, you don't build new muscle. You don't heal. You are on survival mode. No energy is available for extracurricular or optional things when you need to be on full alert fighting for your life. There's a saber-toothed tiger just up the path, right?
How much of a role does that play in this autoimmunity game? So obviously autonomic nervous system being in a sympathetic state, is that a huge contributor to autoimmunity and gut health? Or is it exclusively just like the toxic load?
No. It's a huge contributor. A huge contributor to the development of autoimmunity is that the stress hormones that we produce suppress our immune system. They will not allow our bodies to deal with the threats that we're exposed to, the toxins we're exposed to comprehensively. It just won't allow it to happen. That the priority is get all the blood to your muscles to fight for your life. Get your pupils open really wide so you can see even if it's dark out. Very little to no blood to the digestive tract because it's secondary of nature. Get the blood away from your skin, less blood to your skin, because if you get cut, you don't want to bleed to death. Get your blood to your brain, get your blood to your muscles, get ready to fight for your life. That's the sympathetic dominant state that most of us live in all the time. It was Dr. Hans Selye, S-E-L-Y-E, and his book, The Stress of Life, that came out in the 1950s that identified all of this. And the whole basis, he coined the word stress in association with health. And when we understand this, you really understand that, and stress hormones fuel the microbiome in a way that is not very healthy for us. It's the species of bacteria that thrive on stress hormones create more intestinal permeability and leaky gut. And when you have the leaky gut, the gates are open in the development of autoimmune diseases.
That's really interesting. I never considered how much. I mean, obviously, I considered stress influencing inflammation and factors like this, and obviously slowing down digestion or stopping digestion. Is there a consideration as far as the sympathetic nervous system, igniting some type of cortisol release and then blunting or shunting blood away from the stomach, and then food just sitting there and not digesting? Does that become the issue, or is it actually the fact that these stresses are igniting, perhaps incorrect word, but igniting the production of more of these bacteria that are leading to leaky gut?
Well, that's a really good question. Is it the chicken or the egg?
Yeah,
We don't
know, I guess.
There's no question. If you read the physiology journals, very little blood goes to the heart. Very little digestive enzymes are produced when you're in a sympathetic dominant state.
Yeah,
it's not a priority. You're not going to be eating right now. You're fighting for your life. And that doesn't make sense to us when we think about, well, I'm not fighting. I'm just sitting around. Or I'm just driving in rush hour traffic. I'm fine eating my Big Mac or my slider here. And oh my God, what a nightmare to your body. That not only are we in a constant fight, flight, or fright state in rush hour traffic, the guy that keeps like 5 cars distance from the car in front of you, it irks you. Does it ever irk you thinking, come on, let's go, I want to get home? As if you're going to get home any quicker if that guy were tailgating on the one in front of you, right?
Right.
But
exactly.
You're in that mode of rush, and here's a guy who's just trying to stay calm and trying to stay safe, maybe listening to some classical music in his car or listening to a podcast like this one, really thinking about it while he's alert but not keyed up. Which way do you want to drive in the bumper-to-bumper traffic of Los Angeles or wherever you live? The calmer you are, the more relaxed you are, the less stress and the less detrimental effects that drive home is going to have on you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's such an easy skill set, right? It's like, just breathe, take a breath, and all of a sudden your brain
just
goes,
breathe. Just
right?
breathe, right.
Yep. So
Really
many people
great.
are so focused on what I have to do, and that's our culture, right? We live in a culture of I need to get this done. I have 30 things on my to-do list for today when there should be 3. And so I'm blaming everybody else for getting in my way when I've just, I'm not being very efficient with my time and my use of my time. I interrupt this podcast to bring you guys a special message. Now, everything I put in my body, well, at least most of the time, is organic. And I'm an advocate of eating organic, not only because I think glyphosate is very bad for you or because I think Astrazine is very bad for you, which they are. By the way, after the last podcast, I had a farmer reach out to me saying he's an avid listener of the podcast. And he said, I'm a soy and corn farmer from Iowa, and I put glyphosate and Astrazine on all of my stuff. And the reality is this stuff is terrible, toxic, and atrocious for your body. But if I didn't do this, I actually wouldn't be able to run a business. So I do it for the livelihood of myself and my family. And that's a very interesting perspective. I was really touched that he reached out to me and said, hey, man, I realize how bad these things are, but we have no other solution. So, you know what, guys, I'm not someone who's going to support the use of Astrazine and glyphosate, but maybe we need to find some means of an alternative solution because ultimately, this is their livelihood. This is what they know. I digress. The point of the conversation today is living your greatest life in your greatest body, and choosing organic is necessary, not just because of, like I say, the Astrazine and glyphosate, but because if we buy them, we're advocating them. So the organic conversation is a bit of a tangent, but it's not, because the point of this interruption from the podcast is to bring you a special message from our sponsor, Four Sigmatic. If you don't know who Four Sigmatic is absolutely awesome, and they're super cool because they're organic. Now, you guys know my greatest mission in life is to live a really long life in a body that I love, but more importantly, I want to have a brain that functions like a superhuman. Ultimately, I don't want to get old and lose my ability to function. I want to keep getting better and better and better every single year, every single day for the rest of my life. When I read a book, I want to remember it. I don't want to read a book a week and not remember it. That's like working out and not getting any results, right? That's silly. This is the reason we teach the muscle intelligence lifestyle. This is also the reason that we upgrade our brains every chance we get. And so many people are addicted to things that are stimulating, that are maybe not healthy for the brain. So I've become an advocate of doing things that are upgrading your brain, making your brain actually work better by itself, not adding things externally that are going to force me to work more or work harder or anything like that. I want my brain to actually function like a child, like my little babies, where they're these learning little sponges. So what you're needing to do is you need to upgrade something called neurogenesis, which means your brain's ability to form new neurons. And one of the only things that we find on the planet now that is able to do that is lion's mane. It's one of the things that's been efficaciously researched to say, hey, this is actually forming new neurons in your brain. The other things that you want to be adding in are polyphenols. So blueberry extract, resveratrol, pterostilbene, PQQ. These are things that you want to be adding in to allow your brain to actually form new neurons and be healthy and function optimally and have the proper mitochondrial function in your brain to be able to learn new things every single day for the rest of your life. Because we're not just here to have an awesome body, we're here to have an awesome mind, because that's what's going to form your greatest life. That being said, I'd love for you guys to go check out foursigmatic.com/muscle, because Four Sigmatic is bringing this show to you. Four Sigmatic has been upgrading my brain for 6 months, and I think they're awesome. I think you guys are going to absolutely love the mushroom movement. So what you want to do is you want to add Four Sigmatic to your morning coffee, like I do, with a little bit of MCT and a little bit of alpha GPC, or add it to your post-workout or even pre-workout shake. It tastes great. It's a little bit of a nutty flavor. You don't need any butter in your morning coffee because it makes it a little bit creamy. It's awesome. And the cool thing about it is no impact carbohydrates. It's got a little bit of fiber in it. So enjoy the rest of the show with Tom O'Brien. I want to really dive deep on understanding this intestinal permeability piece. And, one of the things I love about what you're talking about is the things we're putting into our body, right? Like, what are the environmental triggers from what's happening outside of our body, but what's also the environmental triggers as far as, the water and the food quality that we're going into. I'd love for you to give our audience a really great deep dive into understanding the intestinal permeability from a food and water perspective.
Sure. First, to continue on the intestinal permeability thing, where I wanted to go, and I got distracted, that's where my mind goes sometimes, but where I wanted to go is that the gut that you've got now is the gut that has developed over decades of how you've lived your life. Mm-hmm. Every slider that you eat, every truffle-flavored French fry, every Coke, every potato chip. Do you know that if you eat potato chips or French fries 3 times a week or more, your increase in early mortality is 30%? You're 30% more likely to die early in life compared to someone of the same age who doesn't smoke if you don't smoke. But all other factors being equal, you're over 30% more likely to die early if you have French fries or potato chips 3 times a week. Well, wait a minute. I don't eat French fries 3 times a week. I only eat them once a week. As if that's safe, So the message is you can't put that stuff in your body, because those transformed fatty acids, they stay in your bloodstream for up to 57 days. 57 days for every one of those. So why is some people's blood so thick? Strokes and heart attacks are the number one cause of dying in our country, cardiovascular disease. Why is that happening? For most of us, it's what's on the end of our fork, right?
Yep.
So back to the gut, those things that you eat, everything that you eat feeds the microbiome. So are you feeding the microbiome, the good guys, with the polyphenols and the antioxidants from fresh berries and rainbow colors of vegetables? The rainbow diet is one of the healthiest things you could do, is just eating foods of 5 different colors every day is going to be so beneficial to feed your microbiome. There is a family of foods called prebiotics, and the root vegetables and many others, but prebiotics feed the probiotics in your body, the good bacteria. And North America, 78% of the prebiotic in the North American diet is wheat. And when you learn that there are so many bad things to wheat, and you give up wheat, you go gluten-free, and the result is you feel so much better, but you've just eliminated 78% of all the food that the bacteria in your gut had been depending on. And you eat the gluten-free foods, which have no prebiotics at all. They're just white paste. They're junk. They're just junk food. Now, I don't have a problem. I eat a gluten-free blueberry muffin maybe once every couple months. And I have gluten-free pasta maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks when I want a pasta feeling. So there's really good ones that you can get, but you don't live on that stuff. It's not food to fuel your body. It's just white paste. And when you remove the wheat from your diet, which is a good thing, but when you remove the wheat and you don't replace the prebiotics with root vegetables and other foods, the result is a few months down the road, you're getting sick. At first, you felt better on a gluten-free diet, but now something's not working quite right. And 3, 4, 6 months, a year down the road, you're not as healthy as you were before. And there are some new things that are popping up. It's because the good bacteria in your gut have died off that were dependent on the prebiotics from wheat. And when they die off, there's no competition anymore. And then the bad bacteria rears its ugly head and colonizes more, and you start getting more sick. So gluten-free diets are excellent for you, but you've got to replace the prebiotics. And what I tell our patients, I tell our patients, when you go shopping, always buy organic, always, but get a couple of each root vegetable that's in the supermarket. Get rutabagas and turnips and parsnips and radishes and carrots and sweet potatoes, not so much white potatoes. And every day you have one root vegetable, Mrs. Patient, every day, and then go to Google and type in prebiotic foods, the list of prebiotic foods. And here comes this list of 50 to 100 foods. And you have 2 of those foods every day. What's that? A banana is a prebiotic food. An artichoke is a prebiotic food. So they're not all weird things like chicory root, which much of the country has never heard of and don't know what it is. But they're regular foods like onions and things that are prebiotics. So 1 root vegetable and 2 prebiotic foods from the list of prebiotics every day. And then you're feeding your good bacteria, the probiotics, with the kind of foods they need. Another example.
I love that. Yeah, I love that framework. That's such a great framework because I'm not sure how you eat typically, but a huge thing right now in the world of fitness and just in the world in general, I think, is we have kind of this war. It sounds like, and maybe not the right word, but this dichotomy between people who are going vegetarian and there's people who are going keto, which is like polar opposite ends of the spectrum. Both of which have their strengths and weaknesses. But particularly in the keto world, I see this massive limitation, or at least I believe, in feeding the prebiotics. If you're eating exclusively meat or if you're eating exclusively fat, typically it's massively deficient in these prebiotic foods, and people are, I think long term, I don't know, but I think long term are going to start to run into some serious health implications.
You're absolutely
on that?
right. And that's just science, we all like to jump on a bandwagon, and take it for a ride. And I'm a paleo guy, or I'm a keto guy, or I'm a vegetarian guy, and everybody needs to be vegetarian. No, they don't.
Exactly.
No, they don't. For some people, it's the best thing in the world they could possibly do. For some people, it's not. Well, how is that determined? It's determined by your microbiome. What you feed the microbiome is how you determine what diet to eat. So when you do the proper types of analysis and you find out what kind of microbiome you have, where's it out of balance, and what does it take to bring it into balance, that's the superfoods that you eat, are the ones that are going to feed the microbiome of the good guys that are a little deficient for you right now. So you may go for berries because of the resveratrol that's in grapes, or you may go for berries because of the antioxidants that are in them, or you may go for acai because of the astaxanthin that's in them, because all of the different polyphenols and antioxidants feed different bacteria in your gut. Mm-hmm. And it's the diversity of the beneficial bacteria in your gut that will rock your world and keep you strong and vital and healthy and living a long life. It's the diversity.
Yeah. Now talk to me about grains. So we know, I want you to talk about glyphosate too, but before we talk about glyphosate, or maybe there's a segue there where we talk about grains. Are grains en masse something people should be avoiding, or is it a person by person basis, or is it a quality thing? Like, is it like, hey, you should just be eating organic, as long as you're not getting, the glyphosate in there, you're going to be okay. And with respect to exclusively intestinal permeability.
The first thing in terms of grains is no one should be eating wheat. Harvard published, again, I've got 5 studies on this, but Harvard published in 2014, Hollon, Hollon, and Fasano at Harvard published, they published that every human, when you eat wheat, you develop intestinal permeability. Every human. So anyone that's listening to this podcast, if you're human, if you are, wheat is tearing up your gut. Now, we have an entire new body every 7 years. Some cells reproduce very quickly. The inside lining of your gut's every 3 to 5 days. The entire lining is new every 3 to 5 days. So you eat toast for breakfast, you tear the lining, but it heals. You have a sandwich for lunch, you tear the lining, but it heals. Pasta for dinner, you tear the lining, but it heals. A cookie, tear the lining, but it heals. Crouton on your salad, tear the lining, but it heals. Your lipstick's got your makeup has, and your lipstick has gluten in it, tears the lining, but it heals. Day after week after,
lipstick.
Yeah, yeah, good for you, man. Your vitamins, if they don't say gluten-free, they likely have wheat, because every company is proud to say when they're wheat-free. So you take your vitamins, tears the lining, but it heals. Your medications, thyroid medications got wheat in it, tear the lining, but it heals. It's the accumulation of all of the exposures, day after week after month after year after year after year, until one day you don't heal anymore. So you're tearing the lining, but you don't have any symptoms. But one day you cross that line, it's called loss of oral tolerance. You don't heal anymore. You don't have tolerance anymore. Now you get pathogenic intestinal permeability. Now these molecules get into the bloodstream through the leaky gut, and now you're off to the races with the spectrum of development of autoimmune diseases. So the first one is wheat. The second one, corn. 50% of the patients with celiac disease have a sensitivity to corn. And this is published. And what does that mean? It means if you eat corn, you still get antibodies to wheat, causing the damage. The same is true with dairy, but we're talking about grains here. Grains in general, there is nothing wrong with grains for some people. There's really some fabulous results with grains for some people. And there's everything terribly wrong with grains for some people. Everybody wants the shotgun answer that's going to be right for, for an easy and convenient. There is no shotgun answer. I'm sorry to tell you, but it's determined by your microbiome, whether or not you should be eating grains, not your belief system. Now, you can transition a microbiome to be more accommodating of what you believe in, or you don't believe in meat. And so if you grew up eating meat, now you're 26 years old and you want to be a vegetarian, you make yourself really sick being a vegetarian unless you transition over the course of an extended period of time. Maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, eating less meats, and now no meats, just chicken and fish, then less chicken, then just fish, then less fish, less fish. You want to be a full vegetarian? Great. But just transition so that you can build the microbiome that's going to support you for the nutrients you're going to be taking in.
Completely understood. And that's a big mistake that a lot of people make is, they don't give a diet a chance to adapt, and they just switch from one to the next, and they assume it doesn't work. And, people do that with keto, and they do keto and they go, I feel like crap, the first week of keto, so they stop. Or, people will, even with any type of healthy diet, they'll apply some type of restriction to their diet. I feel like crap, I don't ever do that. But it's just their body adapting. Anytime you're adapting from homeostasis, there's going to be some response and result, and oftentimes it's just going to be different, right? And if you feel different, most people will attribute that to feeling poor.
You're exactly correct about that. You're exactly right. And I'd like to talk for a minute about keto and the ketogenic diet. There are many studies that show the benefits of a ketogenic diet. No question. Seizures are reduced, brain functions enhanced. You can get a babe body, your summer beach body. There's no question about many of the benefits and desired benefits of a ketogenic diet. However, it's not all peaches and cream. There are some not good things that you have to be aware of. One of them, there is a really toxic, how do I say this? There is this thing called sepsis. Sepsis is when your body gets really toxic and you die. And over 200,000 people a year die in the U.S. from sepsis. It's huge. For many of our elderly, it's what eventually takes them down. Infection after infection after infection, and antibiotic-resistant bacteria, it's not working anymore. They get more toxic, and then they die. So where does this stuff come from that gets in the body? This bacteria, and there's some bacteria, but not a lot. Mostly, it's called lipopolysaccharides, LPS. It's the exhaust of gram-negative bacteria. So there is some bacteria that get in, but not very much. You'd be really, really sick, and some people are. It's called septicemia. That's bacteria in your bloodstream. But most people get sick from LPS, and it's the accumulative effect, and that's called endotoxin. Endo means inside the body. These endotoxic states that people get in because of too much LPS in the bloodstream, this gram-negative bacteria, this exhaust from the gram-negative bacteria. So how does LPS get into the bloodstream? There's a number of ways, and one of them, of course, is through intestinal permeability, the leaky gut. That's the primary way for most people. But for others, there's another primary way that LPS can get into the bloodstream. And this is really important, and the keto people don't want to talk about it. But I think you can do a ketogenic diet very well and very healthfully, that's the right word, in a healthy way if you're aware of this. It's called Lipid-Raft Transytosis. So what does that mean? There's a lot of Scrabble words there again. We absorb our nutrients through the intestinal wall. The nutrients go between the cells. That's called parasympathetic, between the cells or around the cells. And nutrients get absorbed through the cells, right through the cell. That's called transytosis. And the nutrients that get absorbed through the cells are fat-soluble nutrients. Fats go right through your cell, not in between the cells. Not a problem, because the only fats on the planet that we're designed to eat are fats that are easy to absorb, and they're good for us and healthy for us. But all these bad fats that we've been exposed to in our lives have completely changed how our gut relates to fats. So this thing, lipid's another word for fats, raft, like a boat, lipid raft, transytosis, right through the cell. Lipid-Raft Transytosis. LPS is absorbed via lipid-raft transytosis. Also paracellularly, but the main way LPS gets into your bloodstream, this gram-negative bacteria and the exhaust of gram-negative, the toxic exhaust of gram-negative bacteria is right through your cells. No damage to the cells, right through the cells. Lipid-Raft Transytosis. So you do high-fat diets, those fats act as a raft, act as a boat to carry LPS, this toxic crud, into our bloodstream and make us sick as a dog. It may take years before enough of this LPS has accumulated, but once you open those gateways through the cell, future lipid-raft transytosis is easier and easier and easier. Because when you have the good fats absorbing on these rafts right through the cells, the immune system looks at us, oh, that's all fine, no problem at all. But when you have these bad fats that have been French fries, deep fried foods, margarines, all the crud that we've grown up on, most of us has grown up on, they hop on the back of these fats, go right through the cell. But as they're going through the cell, the immune system says, well, this is a bad fat. This is not good for us. And the immune system starts to attack these fats. And you start damaging the cell, and the cell starts to break down. The actual cell starts to break down. And in your gut, that is one type of intestinal permeability that develops. It's a nasty type when it's not just between the cells that are gapping open, like the Panama Canal. It's right through the cells, and the walls are breaking down. Awesome. You get your walls broken. You get the walls broken down. You get a lot more LPS coming right through.
Now, can we unpack that a little bit? So, what are the main causes of LPS? Like, what are the main triggers? Is it just going to be these bad fats? And then how does someone differentiate, like when you're saying these bad fats, is it just like a trans fat? Is it excessive amounts of saturated fat? What exactly are we doing? Are we saying, is it denatured fats? What are these things that are causing this lipid-raft transytosis?
The fats that have been identified are saturated fats and trans fats that carry right through.
All saturated fats?
Yes, which is shocking because that's coconut oil. And coconut oil is not bad for you, but excessive coconut oil may not be good for you. Well, if a little bit's good, a lot is better. Not necessarily. Well, I lose weight. Well, we'll put that on your tombstone. You know, that we can't be fanatical about this stuff. And you have to test. You have to see, do I have elevated LPS in my bloodstream? Do I have antibodies to LPS in my bloodstream? Is my immune system saying I've crossed the line, and now the immune system has to allocate its very precious energy to fighting LPS, which is a nasty and affects your brain and many other tissues.
LPS naturally occurs in the gut as a result of the excretions of gram-negative bacteria. That's correct?
Correct. And we all are exposed to this.
Bacteria? Right. What is gram-negative bacteria?
There are two types of bacteria. There's two families of bacteria, gram-positive and gram-negative. Gram-negative are bacteria that really, I have never seen what benefit they bring to the human body. I don't know of any, but it's part of the environment, so it's on some of our foods. We're going to get exposure to it, but it's not supposed to get into the bloodstream. It's supposed to go out with the stool. It's when it gets into the bloodstream that we develop a lot of problems.
So then everyone has them, and now we know definitively that if you eat saturated fat and if you eat trans fats, you are going to have some of this lipid-raft transytosis just because of the presence of trans fats and saturated fats. You are going to get LPS. There's no way, right?
There's no study that has said everybody's going to get it every time they eat it. The studies say this is the mechanism by which this stuff gets into your bloodstream.
Gotcha. But so omega-3s, omega-6, omega-9, they will not cause this LPS transytosis.
I have never found a study, and I've looked. I've never found a study on that. So
Okay.
what's the takeaway with it? The takeaway is you have to be tested to see if you have elevated levels of LPS in your bloodstream or antibodies to LPS. If you do, you can't do ketogenic diet right now. You got to clean up this mess first before you do a ketogenic diet, because you're going to make yourself more sick, more toxic, more endotoxin, which can manifest in your brain. It can manifest in your lungs. It can manifest your kidneys, anywhere in your body. You just have to test. And if you're negative to LPS levels in the bloodstream and negative to antibodies of LPS in your bloodstream, then you can do a ketogenic diet.
Is there any way for someone to differentiate between whether this LPS is occurring because of intestinal permeability or because of this lipid-Raft Transytosis?
Not that I know of. I don't know of any way to differentiate.
The solution would just be to do some type of gut recovery, gut healing protocol prior to starting a ketogenic diet. Make sure your gut is not permeable, and then maybe a ketogenic diet could be an effective solution for you.
Well, that's a rational approach, but it's still a shotgun approach. What my preference when my patients ask me, I say, let's do a simple blood test. Let's find out if you've got LPS in your bloodstream now or antibodies to LPS in your bloodstream now. If you do, then we know. We don't want to encourage more lipid-Raft Transytosis right now because you run the risk of being sick. When they do autopsy on Alzheimer's patients and they biopsy the plaque in the brains, it's loaded with antibodies to LPS. Loaded. This stuff gets in your brain, and it triggers inflammation in your brain that can manifest as any brain deterioration disease. So you just need to check, people. Everyone that is considering a ketogenic diet, and there's a lot of benefits to ketogenic diets. I've spoken with some of the scientists that were the originators and published the papers on this, and it's really impressive, some of the benefits you can get from a ketogenic diet. But when I bring this point up, they say, oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah, a simple test would be of value just to confirm that they're currently in a place where it's safe to do a ketogenic diet. Now, if your kid's got seizures and nothing is helping, you do the ketogenic diet right away just to calm down the brain, and then you check at the same time if there is indicators of LPS in the bloodstream, then you start working on healing the gut. But you get those seizures under control immediately. But for the people who are considering a ketogenic diet to lose weight, to get a babe bod or an Adonis bod, which is great if you want to do that. But you check first, because if you have to wait 3 to 6 months before you start this thing to make sure you're safe and you're not going to get sick from it, then that's a smart thing to do.
So diving a little bit more into LPS, because I'd like to understand where it's coming from, how we can potentially start to minimize it or minimize our exposure. Is there certain foods, like I know you brought up the unhealthy fats, are those going to predispose us to having a greater predominance? I'm talking just our gut. Now, obviously, we know it's going to happen in our blood if we have leaky gut or if we're getting, the LPT or the LRT, the lipid-Raft Transytosis. But is there certain foods that predispose us to having elevated amounts of LPS in our gut?
Well, there are actually. All foods have a little gram-negative bacteria on them. That's why you just want to rinse your foods off. You just want to soak them or rinse them, just in general principles. But our gut's supposed to be able to handle. That's one of the reasons for hydrochloric acid made in the stomach. Hydrochloric acid just kills this bacteria right away. So that's the first thing. But there are some studies that shocked me when I saw them. If you peel carrots, now we have the meat of the carrot exposed to the air. There's gram-negative bacteria in the air. And the reason for the peel on a carrot is to protect the meat, to protect the sweetness, one of the reasons. And bacteria really don't hang out too much on the peel of a carrot. They don't. But when you peel carrots, within 4 days of peeled carrots, the LPS count has magnified by over 100-fold. 100-fold, and are really toxic. So all those little bags of peeled carrots that you get in the store that are so convenient because you don't have to take the time to peel them, those peeled carrots, especially when you open the bag and they're a little slimy, there's a terrible amount of LPS on those. lipopolysaccharides from gram-negative bacteria.
Good to know.
Diced onions is the same way. Take the peel off of an onion, dice it. Within 4 days, you've increased the amount of LPS to dangerous levels.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing to know, because like I'm always of the mindset, or at least historically, I've been like, well, I'm just trying to, I'm developing my microbiome. I try to eat as many diverse foods as I can. I try to get to as many diverse environments as I can to breathe.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, if there's a food kind of like, I mean, if I buy carrots at the grocery, I'm like, I don't even wash the carrots sometimes. I'll be like, I'll just eat it. It'll be good for my microbiome. It's a small dose.
As long as it's organic. As long as they're organic, because if not, it's there's the insecticides and pesticides you're also taking in, right?
Yeah, the glyphosate bombs. Yeah, I only eat organic, and if I don't have organic, I just don't eat. That's another topic that if we spend a few minutes diving into, if you don't mind, is the considerations in intestinal permeability when it comes to things like glyphosate and astrazine.
Glyphosate, there is no question that the studies are very clear. Glyphosate destroys your microbiome. Whether or not glyphosate creates intestinal permeability directly, it's been questionable, but a study came out last year that was definitive, but it's only one study. And I don't know of more than that, but there's no question it destroys your microbiome.
Right, but we know one of the functions of the microbiome is to maintain intestinal permeability, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah. So if it's destroying the microbiome we don't know for sure, but by deductive reasoning, you would presume that these antibiotic, glyphosate, pesticides, herbicides are probably causing increased intestinal permeability.
Exactly right. Now, remember, intestinal permeability is not bad for you. That's how we absorb all of our nutrients. The intestines have to be permeable to allow nutrients to get in. It's excessive intestinal permeability, or the term I use is pathogenic intestinal permeability. That's what's bad for you. So you don't want to cross the line into pathogenic intestinal permeability. So glyphosate is another piece of the puzzle of the accumulative damage that takes you over the line, loss of oral tolerance, and eventually your body's going to compensate for that.
Dr. Tom, one of your recent books is Betrayal, the Autoimmune Disease Solution They're Not Telling You. Oh, that's a docuseries.
Right. That's the docuseries.
Tell me about what is the solution?
That is remarkable. The docuseries, my wife and I traveled 7 different countries. We interviewed 85 different people, the world's leading scientists in the world of autoimmunity, the godfathers in autoimmunity. And then we interviewed the clinicians, the doctors in practice, who were using some of the concepts from the papers that the scientists were publishing. And then we interviewed the patients who were following the recommendations of the clinicians for their rheumatoid. And here's a patient testifying she completely reversed her rheumatoid, or MS. And here's the patient that shows you a picture of her 2 years ago in a wheelchair. She can't walk, and she had 8 lesions on her brain in the MRIs. Here she is today with only 2 lesions left on her brain and no symptoms whatsoever. And so you hear these stories, and you hear it from the scientists as to where does this stuff come from? And when you hear it and you understand it, it's an OMG for you. And you realize, wow, I just need to ask different questions in terms of how to take care of myself. So everyone should watch Betrayal. It's free. It's free. We've had over 500,000 people watch it, and we're very proud of that. We'll
definitely link to it in the show notes.
Marvelous. Please, everyone that's listening, just take a look. You might want to watch the whole thing. You might watch some of it and say, wow, this is really interesting, and that's all you'll watch. But when you take a look at it, it changes the way you think about disease. It really does. That was our goal.
So specific to celiac disease, I'm curious, is this something that is predominantly just an autoimmune thing that people contract because of certain environmental exposures, or is there a genetic component there as well?
Well, think about what we said the trilogy was. Celiac is a disease that is the classic model of that, and that is that you have to have the genes, and the most common genes are called HLA, DQ2, and DQ8. Those are the most, 93 to 97% of all celiacs have one or both of those genes. So you have the gene, then there's an environmental trigger, And celiac disease is the only one for which we know what the exclusive environmental trigger is, and that's wheat.
Could you tell me the gene one more time?
HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8.
Okay.
There are more genes than that associated, but those are the primary two that cover 93 to 97% of all the celiacs. And then the third component is your gut and loss of tolerance and the development of intestinal permeability. Because 30% of the population carries the gene for celiac, but only 1 to 2% of them get celiac.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? They've got the gene. Well, it's because they crossed the line. They lost oral tolerance. How did they cross the line? Well, something happened in their gut, and it caused intestinal permeability, and then they were off to the races. What happened in the gut? Well, that's everything we just talked about in this show and a whole lot more.
Absolutely fantastic. Dr. Tom, you are a breath of fresh air, to be honest, because so many people fight me on these things, right? I mean, I'm the guy who's like, hey, remove all the glyphosate, only eat organic food, don't eat anything from plastic, and that you're the guy who's actually substantiating what I'm trying to articulate to people. So I'm truly grateful for the message you're conveying and for all your research and time committed to trying to change people's lives. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. For all those guys who are giving you flack, you send them to me. You send them to me, man.
You're a fighter. I'm a lover. You're a fighter.
Listen, as I said earlier, we don't have time. I've got a 2-year-old granddaughter, and my wife and I are thinking of having kids, and there's not going to be a world for them to live in. If this front page New York Times yesterday, another whale just washed up on shore in Thailand. Mm-hmm. 18 pounds of plastic in its stomach. That's what killed him. Is the tremendous amounts of plastic that are out in the oceans now. We have to stop using plastic straws in our drinks. The heck do you need a straw for? I mean, it looks good. Well, but it's killing the planet. It blew me away to read there are 50 million straws a day being used in the world.
Wow.
50 million straws a day. It's a holy cow. We just have to wake up and start making smarter choices of how we live our lives because we don't have time. We actually have crossed over, and they're talking about the 6th extinction now. No one knows how to save the glaciers and the water that comes from the glaciers that feed the villages that are at altitude all over the world, like Boulder at 5,000 feet. Where's the water going to come from when the glaciers are gone? No one knows how to fix the increase in diabetes. No one knows. Well, actually, that's not true. We do know, but we need people to listen. The loss of vertebrate species on the planet, 78% of every mammal that lives near fresh water. There's a 78% reduction in the populations of every mammal that lives near fresh water.
So now, if we wanted to change the planet, obviously we talked about this a little bit. Is it, in your opinion, obviously it's an opinion-based thing, but is it just as simple as, completely remove plastic? Or give me a few more thoughts and theories about what you think we need to do? Because, the audience of this podcast is growing tremendously. And
congratulations for that. That's great.
Thank you. We're beginning to have an impact.
Nice. Well, it's because you take point and you stand for positions that are right, whether it's acceptable or not. Yeah, so what do you do? This is what you do. As far as I can tell, this is what you do. You read my book, The Autoimmune Fix. It won the National Book Award, by the way, which I'm really proud of. I know, that's unheard of in health books. They don't win National Book Awards. Mm-hmm. This one did. I just got an email one day. Congratulations, you've won the National Book Award. Well, okay, thank you. There was no lobbying or nothing for that. Just happened because it's a great book. And when you read the book, see, we have to change how we think, not what we do. When you change how you think, what you do changes automatically. We have to change how you think. Let me give you an example. When you pump gas, can you sometimes smell the gas while you're standing there pumping gas?
Absolutely.
You're smelling benzene. It's a neurotoxin. It goes right through your lungs, into your bloodstream, up to your brain, creating inflammation in the brain, killing brain cells. Mm-hmm. Every time you smell it. So what do? You're standing downwind. Walk around to the other side of the hose. Now you're standing upwind. It's not rocket science.
Right.
But we don't think that way. We don't think how to protect our bodies from the accumulative amount of toxins, like the 22 vaccinations and the plastics, the plasticizers. And we don't think about how to reduce the accumulative exposure of environmental toxins. It's not on our radar. We have to get it on our radar. When you get it on your radar, you're going to change the way you think. And when you and your spouse are considering a house, you'll consider wood floors with natural wood and natural finishes, as opposed to carpeting that outgasses for years. And you'll have some rugs, but they'll be natural rugs. You'll think of solid wood cabinets, and you'll save your dollars so that you can afford them for solid wood cabinets, so you're not getting press board that outgasses formaldehyde. You'll think about water filters. You'll think about shower filters to get the chlorine out, because where we get more chlorine in our lives than anywhere else is in the shower. We breathe the steam, and chlorine inhibits thyroid function. You'll just start thinking differently when you change your context to reduce the total toxic load that we're exposed to every day.
And all of these things are in your book?
That's correct. That's correct. That's why I won the National Book Award, I think, is because it's a common sense. It's common sense. It's really walk around to the other side of the hose when you're pumping gas. It's like, duh. But we just
common
don't.
sense to you, but people don't think about, like, honestly, people breathe things and they don't realize, like, hey, that's actually getting into my blood. Or people put on makeup every day and they're like, oh, that's actually going into my body. Like, people just don't stop to think, right?
Within 5 minutes, the nail polish you put on your nails is in your bloodstream. And it's highly toxic. You wonder why so many people have big thighs and spare tires around their midsection. The primary reason nowadays today is called obesogens. It's a whole category of chemicals. They're called obesogens because they make you obese. These chemicals that we're exposed to, the body puts them into the fat cells to get them out of circulation. Get them out of circulation. If your detox pathways can't get them out of your body, the brain says, get them away from me. Put them in the fat cells, and they get stored in the fat cells. You get more fat.
I think part of the reason is it's very vague. So, from the time we're kids, we're taught to fear everything, right? And like, oh, don't do that, you're going to fall down. Oh, don't do that, don't stand on there, you're going to fall down. And then everybody just becomes numb to this fear mongering of, oh, don't do that, it's toxic. And it's very vague, right? What does toxic mean?
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
So people like yourself start diving into, like, hey, don't do that. It's going to do this. It's going to, like, give me a definitive outcome. Like, hey, if you smell gas, you're destroying your brain. Hey, if you put plastic or you put makeup on your face, you're going to make your ass fat. Like, that's a pretty definitive end result. If you tell people that, I think they're more likely to actually listen to you rather than just this fear mongering around, like, oh, don't do it, it's toxic, it's bad for you. Like, smoking's bad for you, yet everyone still does.
And so for women, that makeup's an important thing. I get it. So you look for companies like Anna Marie, which everything's organic, and there's others. I don't know the others. Those guys are just my friends, and I know they're pure and they're just fanatical about it. So I guess I just gave them a plug. But there are other there are other companies also. But you just start asking questions. What am I putting on my body, and is it safe? And you won't know the answer, but when you start asking the question, you'll start exploring in your own ways, and you'll look for makeups that are organic and safe for you, lipsticks that are gluten-free, shampoos that are safe for you. You just start thinking that way, and you reduce your toxic load. For many people, it's not possible to lose weight or lose inches off of your backside by dieting. It's not possible. It's the last place where you lose the weight because it's full of toxic chemicals.
I love that you're saying that. I just wrote a really long. It's a chapter of my book about that. Like, people, the first phase of fat loss, most people go, I'm going to start doing exercise. I'm going to start cutting my calories, and I'm like, it's futile, right? You have to get your body back up to speed with its detoxification pathways and start, first of all, removing the toxin.
Yeah, well, the exercise is a good idea because the circulation helps to flush this stuff out. If you're sweating, if you do it sensibly. So I would
Right.
agree with that part.
My
But then you think about
demographic is
things.
already exercising, right? They're looking for that next step.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. I think about things like infrared saunas, incredibly valuable for you. I'm going to do a Facebook Live, I think, in the next week or two, and within the next couple of weeks, it's scheduled in there somewhere, on infrared saunas and just how they help to flush these toxins out. When you sweat, you're sweating out these poisons that have been stored in your body. That's why some people, when they sweat, they just smell bad.
Yeah.
It's because of this microbiome that's developed around all these toxins in your body. And as you get the toxins out, the environment changes, you get a healthier microbiome. You know how sweet babies smell?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, you know how sweet babies smell? Wouldn't it be great to have a body that smells like that again? Right? Just really pleasant and soft and attractive and easy, not full of all the toxic crud that we've accumulated in our 30, 50, 70 years of life.
Yeah.
Get that stuff out of you.
It's like, when you walk by a dumpster and you smell all that like just putrid bacteria coming out of there. Like that's the thought, right? Is so many years of when that trash can was new, it smelled nice.
Yeah.
And years and years of accumulating garbage, that's what it starts to smell like. And that's the same with somebody's body, right? You have to start removing all that garbage that you're accumulating, and then you can actually, live the rest of your life not smelling like a trash can.
One of my favorite foods, unfortunately, because it brings back my childhood with my grandparents, is sopressata salami. Okay. I love sopressata salami. Yeah. I just do. And especially organic sopressata salami. It's great. But if I eat sopressata salami 3 days in the world, my body odor is terrible. That's the microbiome.
Yep.
And it feeds a microbiome that's not a healthy microbiome, right? So you start feeding more of the foods that bring sweetness to life, I guess I would say.
Sure. But then I'm not sure how to say it. Prebiotic foods. You talk about prebiotic foods like onions, and that's going to make most people is going to make them smell bad. So where's the balance, right? So that's, quote unquote, a healthy food that's bringing you, bad body odor.
Yeah. Instead of a third of an onion in that plate of food that you're eating, you do 1/15 of an onion, and you won't smell bad. It's because your microbiome can't handle the onions, and it feeds the bad bacteria. The bad bacteria, your microbiome can't digest the prebiotic, and so it causes an exhaust, and that's the gas that you get.
Absolutely.
So you just titrate. You titrate up little by little.
Right. So, Dr. Tom, if you tell me what day you're doing that Facebook Live, I can actually try to plan to release this podcast before then, and hopefully get some of our demographic on there for you. Because
thank you very much. I will carry that message to my team. I'll let them know right away, because I'll forget. So I'll tell them as soon as we get off the phone, and make sure that they let you know. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure talking with you.
So what did you guys think of the episode? Dr. O'Brien is a wealth of knowledge. We went down some tangents, we went down some rabbit holes, but I think at the end we pulled it back in and really gave you guys some incredible, valuable takeaways. So how to mitigate toxicity on a ketogenic diet. That was very interesting to me. I don't know enough about it to comment and give you my opinion, but that was super interesting that he brought up the Lipid-Raft Transytosis. Again, I don't know anything about it, but I'm going to dig into it now. We know a little bit about LPS, lipopolysaccharide. Typically, I just thought it was correlated with leaky gut, but now we know there's a second cause, and something super interesting if you're on a ketogenic diet. We talked a little bit about glyphosate and intestinal permeability. One of the takeaways that Dr. Tom brought up was to have 2 prebiotic foods and 1 root vegetable every day, even on a ketogenic diet. I think it doesn't have to be a lot. It's just you want to support that prebiotic environment, in the probiotic environment in your stomach. Talking about aluminum and vaccines, that's a very controversial topic, but everything this man says, he's saying is backed with data and science. So if you're someone who's a science geek, check out PubMed. Let me know if you found anything on there that maybe supports what he says, maybe it doesn't support what he says, but either way, let me know so I can report to you guys, because I always want to give you the most up-to-date information, because ultimately we're all here to live an amazing life, and we want to look good while doing it. We want to feel great while doing it. I want my brain to perform optimally, and for my brain to perform optimally, what goes into my mouth is the most important thing, and what my gut does with it is a very close second. So some of the amazing things that Dr. Tom said, adding 5 colors a day, removing anything that's plastic, and I want to be the first one to be the catalyst for the plastic removal conversation, because I've got kids who I love very much, and I want them to have a planet, and I want their kids to have a planet that still functions, and I want them to be able to live. I don't want them to be able to or be forced to live in some ridiculously toxic environment where they're going to end up suffering. So in the best interest of your life, in the best interest of your ancestors' life and your children's lives, let's all do our best to start removing those toxins, start removing things like plastics from our environment. Step one, right? If we can't do anything, if we can't do everything, let's do one thing. And let's all stop buying plastic. And that includes bottles, that includes Tupperware, which everyone does, and that includes supplements that are going into plastic bottles. And I'm not anti-supplement, but I'm definitely the guy who's getting behind the revolution of let's find a different mechanism of putting these things into our home. So it doesn't have to go into plastic bottles that ultimately are recycling, which is causing additional stress in the environment. So I hope you guys have an amazing day. I hope you loved the episode. And as always, I would greatly appreciate a review. I would greatly appreciate a share. This podcast is fueled by you. And I'm living this life, this amazing life, being able to access these brilliant human beings, bringing the information to you. And I truly appreciate your support ongoing. And as always, a shout out to our sponsors. So if you guys haven't already checked out 4 Sigmatic, 4 Sigmatic mushrooms are those things that when you try them, you're going to love them. You're going to be like, oh my goodness, why haven't I done this before? And the one I always talk to you about is lion's mane. And why do I like lion's mane? Because I'm a brain guy. Like, I got to upgrade my brain every chance I get. So I've noticed a tremendous difference when using lion's mane as far as improving neurogenesis. What does that mean? Improving your ability to learn. As we age, we lose our ability to learn. I want to learn like my 6- and 4-year-old children. These little beasts take up information like at an incredible rate. And after 35 years old, we know that neurogenesis basically stops unless you do something to fix it. So lion's mane is step 1. Reishi is something I'm taking every day now before bed to calm me down. I've also added some turkey tail in there, which is another product from 4 Sigmatic. So if you guys haven't tried these products, I highly suggest you get over there and take advantage. You only get to live one life. Let's do it in an awesome way. Have a great day.